So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio.
I am cracking up here. I threw this question up on social media. How do you know if you should marry someone? And do you know what? You know how many responses I've gotten saying, you just don't know, you've got to trust. And I am laughing because I get where people are coming from. But, if we tell, a 20-something-year-old today, how do you know if this person is the one? You say, you really don't know. They're going to think you're insane. And maybe that's why people aren't getting married. So I'd love to hear what you have to say. We'll discuss this more later on during the show. Head over to my Instagram story or Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. How do you know if someone is the one? But also, I'll add to that question. You can answer on the same feed. Just follow me at relevantradio.com/trending to connect on social media. And you can give us a call. The number's 1-888-914-9149. But with that question is, how do you know someone's the one? But then what makes you marriage material? What makes you marriageable? Maybe, looking back when you were of marrying years in your prime, and maybe you're wondering, what could I have done to make myself more appealing? Or what did I fail to do? Or maybe you're struggling. You're not really sure what those qualities and pieces are of the puzzle that you're trying to put together. I would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts. Maybe there's something about being marriageable that you don't like. There's a piece that maybe a man or a woman is expecting. Maybe you've dated someone and you don't just quite find what they're asking to be adequate. So give us a call. Again, number's 1-888-914-9149, or you can comment on social media. We'll take those questions up a little later on today. Joining me in just a little bit is my good friend and former co-host of Trending, Chris Mueller, and we will be discussing a couple important topics relating to marriage. That is acknowledging mom and why is she the last person to make it to the car? And this idea of being intentional, not just allowing things to happen accidentally and suddenly you give your spouse or your kids attention. So we'll be discussing that in just a little bit with Chris Mueller here on Trending. But here's a question I received yesterday on Instagram. As we're approaching the holidays, maybe you and your spouse are struggling with fertility, and you've had Thanksgiving and people started to ask questions and they start to suggest some ideas, and you are dreading heading to the Christmas meal this year because you know you're going to be pressured yet again to go through with in vitro fertilization. You object wholeheartedly, perhaps because of your faith, the impact it has on a woman's body, the fact that abortion is commonly included along with other moral issues. And so you're not feeling it. It's not your choice, but people continue to push. Why don't you just do in vitro fertilization? I've shared with you before on the show that when I've shared just a little bit at times with people about my own fertility journey, they say, well, why don't you just do IVF? And every time I think, well, first of all, I'm in my 20s. You're really encouraging me to do IVF this quickly? I'm always very surprised. And when we conceived, we did not use in vitro fertilization by the grace of God. You can hear more of my story. That's linked on social media as well. But it was truly a total gift using NAPRO technology. Doctors working with me, NAPRO technology helps to address underlying health concerns. In my case, I have Hashimoto's disease, severe food allergies, and polycystic ovarian syndrome. Some say that's impossible for you to have children. That's just not the case. I was also very blessed that my priest gave me anointing of the sick, and within 3 weeks, we conceived a baby. That's my story. It's a great gift and a great blessing. But so many people were quick to say, why don't you and your husband try IVF? And this was my first response. One, I really think people are just trying to be helpful and offer a solution. But two, people have no clue what they are recommending that you do to your body and possibly your children. And so I always have to look back, if I'm willing to go there, and have the blunt conversation. Do you actually know what you are suggesting that I do? Usually, they have next to no information about IVF other than, well, I heard so-and-so, possibly a popular movie star, or someone in their life who at some point in time used IVF and had a child. But what you don't hear often enough about is that in vitro fertilization along with intrauterine insemination, both have very, very low success rates. Statistics are not quite consistent with this, but we see in terms of intrauterine insemination about 10% success rate. And this will increase, though, if you go through round after round after round after a monthly cycle. And then at a certain point, if you do X so many rounds, you could hit an 80% success rate, but you'd have to go through with a higher number of rounds. This is what many people do intrauterine insemination prior to a woman's body in order to try and inject the sperm into the woman to help things along. Again, a very low success rate. We'll talk about the impact in a second. The next step is usually then to engage in vitro fertilization, also known as IVF. And a lot of statistics show anywhere from a 20 to a 35, 39% success rate. And this success rate only decreases the older you are. For example, that success rate is if you're under the age of 35. If you're over the age of 40, which is the age many people are trying to utilize in vitro fertilization, that drops down to only about 11% success rate. So that tells you, first and foremost, that IVF is not just some quick fix. It has poor results, and the stats just aren't there that any of us should confidently recommend that someone should try intrauterine insemination or IVF. But what about the physical impact on a woman's body? Because that touches on the emotional impact. And I've shared this many times before. The many people who are carrying deep-seated wounds because they were told to try IVF, they went through with it, it didn't work, and for years they continue to have that uneasiness and heartbreak with regard to their fertility. Rather than having a wholesome approach to the body, the person, and acknowledging that, in fact, even the process in and of itself of IVF isn't helpful. You put a woman's body into super ovulation, which can ultimately lead to her never having children naturally down the road. Why? Because that super ovulation causes her eggs to be brought forth much sooner, and that can actually lead her to going into menopause much sooner. In addition to that, we don't talk about the fact that many of those babies do not make it. So you might develop a baby in the womb, things are starting to go well from IVF, but there is a low, that is a 30% rate of live birth following the procedure. We also know of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome that is incredibly damaging for the woman's body. In addition to often there's abnormal bleeding that surrounds each of the baby's sacs in utero. And so what happens is there's hemorrhaging around the baby, and many of these babies end up dying. But then let's say 2 or 3 of those babies hang on, then people face the choice, well, do we want to abort 1, 2, or 3 of these children, or do we want to keep all of them? You also have the crisis of morality, where people are then freezing babies, embryos, babies in the earliest stages of development, to be used at later dates or to be perpetually in an embryo bank. And so that in and of itself as well, the emotional and psychological and physical impact of an abortion, as well as the freezing of these babies, we've seen actually very public and even celebrity cases, not even just, cases of other people who are going through this quietly in their lives, where there are custody battles over the embryos. There's questions of what to do with these little babies in the earliest stages of development. And so this is why I asked the question, if a family member is really going to start to pressure you on this, you have 2 options. 1, you shut the door to that conversation with that family member and say, this isn't something I'm comfortable with discussing, and I'm not okay with IVF. It's not good for my body. Or you can honestly have the question, do you know what you're recommending? And so the ultimate big picture is people don't realize this isn't the answer for someone who's experiencing a fertility battle. And so we need to help others understand that sometimes even if it's in the face of our own pain and struggle with fertility. I highly encourage, as we've talked a lot about this, and this is part of how the conversation came up, Our incredible NAPRO technologies and NAPRO surgeons and doctors will post links on social media that help to treat underlying health causes. And we'll take this topic up more. If you have more questions about IVF and fertility, please don't be afraid to ask. And I'm actually gathering a list of names of people and couples who would like to have their names prayed for by my husband and I, for those of you who are struggling with fertility. We'll be right back. Coming actually up here now, Chris Mueller's with us. If you know Chris, he's from everydaycatholic.com. He was my former co-host on Trending for a while. We had a ball of a time working together, and I'm excited to dive in during our marriage hour today with Chris to discuss why mom is always the last one in the car. Welcome to Trending.
Hey, Timmerie, how you doing?
Great. It's great to hear you back at it again.
Yeah, it's great to hear you too. I understand that you are going to give birth at any minute. This is it's an imminent thing right now.
It's imminent. Who knows what could happen during the show? You know, my poor team, they're like on pins and needles. Wait, she flinched. Is she okay?
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. I know, lots of COVID surprises. Long time no see. So tell me, we are talking during our marriage hour, and I said, what do you want to talk about? And I thought it was fascinating. Bingo, you said, let's talk about mom and why she's the last person to the car. What made you want to talk about this?
Well, you know, it's such a common thing. And obviously, we have a very large family. We've got 6 kids. And, you know, getting anywhere is like mobilizing a small army, right? And it's a small army who doesn't know where their shoes are 90% of the time. And, you know, but nine times out of 10, you know, everyone will be in the car and we're sitting in the driveway. We're waiting for mom. What's going on? And you'll even hear the kid, where's mom? Right. And the one thing that goes unsaid in all of that is the only reason anyone else is in the car is because mom, right? Mom just did all that work. Mom was chasing down those shoes and combing the hair. And the reason these kids look amazing is because of mom. And I just don't think we recognize, you know, how many things are happening in the background that mom makes possible, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just thought I'd love to talk about that, appreciate that. I mean, just, you know, there's so many things that moms do. You know, Christmas morning in so many people's houses, dad's going to be just as surprised as the kids are when he sees those presents opened up, right?
That is such a true example. You know, I'm thinking about being in the car and being a kid, and mom was often, you know, the last one to the car, and it's easy to sit there and be like, where is she? What is she doing? Doesn't she know we're all ready? We're all here. And, you know, you start to, as a kid, to think, well, you know, why is she doing this? You don't get it. And, you know, some kids might be the snarky ones that say, hey, why don't you honk the horn? See what mom's doing. It's a great way to get punished.
Man, don't honk that horn. You can honk it at any other person in the family, but do not honk it then. No, I think it is. It's a reason to kind of go back and review those memories, right? As you were a young person or maybe a teenager and you know, we were all a little self-centered as teenagers. And when the things we did not see. How many things did we just not see? But now as adults, we've got a little more wisdom, a little more perspective, and you can just kind of marvel at, oh my gosh, my mom is going to go straight to heaven. I think she should be there already. You know, like she's just for all of the stuff, all of the self-sacrifice that was given to us, to our family, this whole thing. And so, yeah, just a good reason to reflect on, man, I am so grateful. And then I'll also, you know, as for my wife and the amazing wife and mother that she is, how she just does such an amazing job with our kids and taking care of everything. So.
Well, I think too about, you know, my mom and, you know, what would happen in the home. It was always this attempt to get one more thing done, even if that might mean, you know, you were late to get ready, you were late to go somewhere, you were late to, you know, jump onto something, or something else was kind of crumbling in another area. And I love that in a sense, because getting that one more thing done, as annoying as it could seem to everyone else, that's what kept the ball rolling. And sometimes that's what shows in mothers this sign of endurance, of perseverance, that ultimately we want to build virtue. And this is why God gives us children, so that we can start to do that.
Yeah, you know, and I think a place where we can go wrong as a husband, as a father, where I can go wrong is sometimes I want to say to my wife, it's not that big a deal. Just relax. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. And all of that is true. However, that's not the right thing to say. The right thing to say is, I appreciate what you're doing so much. How can I help you? Right. And yes, I may not see the importance, but she does. And if we look back again from that 40,000 foot view, I can look at my life and I can say, gosh, the things that my mom thought were important really made a difference, and so that, when I look at my wife and all she does to say, yeah, I am, how can I help you? I know this is important to you, and maybe not in the heat of the moment, we could say it's not important. We can have a little conversation. But at that moment when we're scrambling, that's just not the time for sure.
It's a reminder where in Cassie Kanubi, one of the church documents, it talks about how the woman is the heart of the home and the husband is the head of the home. And, we think about like male-female dynamics, how men are so much more oriented toward like the picture of how everything like functions and fits together and like getting it done. But that heart of the home sees the person, sees the little nitty-gritty elements that need to come together to form the heart, to form the function of the home in many ways. And this is seen in that attitude of just get that one more thing done. Make sure that person actually gets food. Make sure this person actually drinks water. Their teeth are brushed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, teeth brushing. Oh my goodness. My kids wouldn't have teeth. There's just, but no, it's so very true, and, I think the amount of attention, to all the little details, right? To keep track of all those things. And, as a kid, because I know with some young people listening, to really try to just this week, particularly, as we reflect on, there's this great truth that Mary gives her life so that that Christ can give his life, right? Like she gave her life so that we could have Christ. She gave her body so that we could have Christ, right? And as we reflect on that, look at your mom and say, how does she give her life for me? And I think what you're going to see is a reflection of that my mom really, truly, so often, more often than not, is just giving her life for me on such a daily basis, and to just stop to appreciate and to really let mom know, I'm so grateful. Thank you,
And, not just giving her life, but giving it all up. Some people, we talk about, so many women talk about wanting to have it all, being able to do everything. But at the same time, the real understanding of parenthood is giving it all up. And women, in a very profound way, they give up their body. Everything about their body changes with pregnancy, how their body functions, how they view their body. And there's something radically transformative for husbands and wives and understanding this. But for the kids, if they start to kind of have this understanding, like, the type of work that mom does, the type of friendships and social life and activities that she engages in completely changes based on those little lives around her.
Yeah, there's this great truth, right? You have to make a choice at some point in your life. And I think where a lot of young parents or young marrieds struggle is that, I have to make a choice. I can't be a kid forever. I can't go in my life is going to be different. I remember when we were pregnant with our first child, my brother was a little bit further ahead of us. They'd been married about a year longer, and they had their, at that point, toddler. And I called him. I was so excited. And he said, "Hey man, everyth's going to change." And I said, good, right? He goes, "Yeah, some good, some bad, but not in a negative way, but just like, but it's true. You change, and that's a good thing. It's a growth thing. It's a natural, it's a human, it's a holy thing, right? We become a witness of God's love. We get to teach our kids what agape looks like, right? So that they are ready to receive that kind of love. And so, yeah, such a powerful truth. Yeah, that, you're right. You have to pick, you have to choose, you have to commit.
Okay, question here. I've got to throw it out there. Advice for new parents from the wise wisdom of you. What do you have? Send it my way.
Oh, sweet mercy. I'll tell you what, enjoy it. It's funny when and I'm not that much older, and we still have young children, but people said it's going to go fast. It's going to go fast. And I have to tell you, you can't understand that until it does. And my baby is 16, right? My first. And so, all of that stress, all of these things, all the things we want to get our kids involved in or doing or achieving, just enjoy the heck out of those kids.
That's Chris Mueller from everydaycatholic.com. We'll be right back talking about the difference between being intentional and just accidentally giving your attention somewhere. We'll be right back.
Does your family have Christmas traditions? Hi, this is Father Rocky with another Advent inspiration. I think every family should have its own Christmas traditions passed down from generation to generation. It's one way of fulfilling the fourth commandment: honor your father and mother. I've got some friends who still keep alive a family tradition after many generations. Every year on Christmas Eve, they invite friends and family over to their house for a wonderful party, and everyone brings along a favorite dish. It's a great moment to reconnect with friends and family you haven't seen in a year, catch up on the news. But the highlight is when everyone gathers in the living room around the piano to sing Christmas carols, and the all-time favorite in this family is Silent Night, because their ancestors came from Germany, and Silent Night was composed originally in German. We sing all the verses in English and then do our best in German as we reflect in wonder and awe what it must have been like to leave Germany 170 years ago to start a new life in America. After all these generations, are we keeping that same faith?
Visit us on our mobile app or at relevantradio.com/Advent.
Sponsorship provided by Catholic Singles, an online dating platform for single Catholics looking for virtuous, faithful, and God-filled relationships. Catholic Singles dating app is where members can nurture relationships with other faithful Catholics. The Catholic Singles app.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Welcome back to our marriage hour here on Trending every Thursday. I threw this question up there. I want to hear from you. You can give us a call, 1-888-914-9149, or head over to social media. You can follow me at Timmerie. Links on social media can be found at relevantradio.com/trending, where you can also subscribe to the podcast and share this episode. Chris Mueller from Everyday Catholics with us. Make sure you answer that question. How do you know if you should marry someone? What makes a marriage material? That's up on social media. Chris, I want to dive into the topic having to do with, life happens, but relationships don't just happen. And I think this is important when we're looking at the marriage issue, building a marriage, having a family, this idea that there's a huge difference between being intentional and just incidentally giving your attention places.
Yeah, it's so true. And life is busy. It just continues to get busy as the kids get bigger and they get more activities and, the demands of work and all of those things. It's so easy to just become ships passing in the night in a house. We're both doing our things. And so, one of the things it's been really important in our relationship is to try to make sure we're spending intentional time with each other. And I've heard this, you hear this kind of marriage wisdom, like, well, you should go on a date every week. I'm sure you should, but it ain't always that easy, right? And so one of the things my wife and I we kind of had to come to was, what? It's not every date, but sometimes just going to Costco together, it can be time together. And I thought, well, what did we do when we were just dating? We wouldn't go on these big elaborate we would just hang out, right? And so, making sure we're spending time to just hang out together. And so it might just be as simple as, like my wife and I, we work out in the mornings. And so, 5:30 in the morning, she'll usually come in about 6 because she does her prayer before time. We're usually out there together and we can just be present to each other. Right. And again, that's an intentional incidental. Does that make sense? Like there's these moments where we can have intentional incidentals while we're doing our life, but we're making sure we're being present. And so I think, it's both. And, the thing I think about when I think about this approach to the intentionally incidental or incidental intentionality, whatever is, in our prayer life, we are intentional with God. We have these moments, let's call it a date, right? Our Sunday Mass is a date with God. It's a very intentional thing. Our daily time of prayer is probably should be a very intentional thing. But St. Paul tells us to pray without ceasing. Well, that's a very incidental. That's saying, I'm going to have my mind present to the Lord at all times, right? And so if God speaks into my life, I'm ready to respond. And so when I'm in the house with my wife and our amazing kids, and life is happening, if my wife says, hey, honey, I need to talk to you about something, then there's an incidental intentionality, right? That I have to be able to be present, even that it's not like this, well, this is our date right now. No, I still have to be able to be present, stop thinking about what I was thinking about, and to be present to her. And that, I tell you what, is difficult and does take work, right? Because everybody's got a million things in their mind. And so for me, it will say, okay, I got to stop thinking about work. I got to stop thinking about that thing I was trying to unlock. And now I got to be present so I can hear what she's actually saying, you know?
And this is a good reminder. I mean, I know that you work from home, you have a large family, you guys have also been battling cancer with your son, Ben, and there's been a lot going on in your life. And so it's easy for you to compartmentalize and just stay in one compartment and then something to come up with the kids or your wife and not necessarily be as present in those incidental moments. So how do you work to be present with everything, you know, you're carrying on your shoulders right now and not kind of just let things flow by?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. One, being, again, we're using these words over and over again, incidental, intentional. Being intentional with your time allows you to be more present outside of those intentional times, right? So like if I know I have my day blocked, I'm getting my things done, right? Then when I'm out of my office, when I'm out of work, I can be present at home. You know, if I had a list of things to do today and I got them done, and if I didn't get something done, I said, okay, I'm going to close the book on that. It can wait till tomorrow. Then it gives me permission to be present when I'm not there. But I think what most of us do is we don't have a really clear plan for our day. We don't know what the most important thing to get done was. We just sort of do the tasks we have, and there's always more to get done. And so we go home, but we never turn off because we never gave ourselves permission to not be working or not to be thinking about those things. And so people, you know, we miss that. We miss that opportunity to be present. And I'll tell you what, here's a huge thing that we all need to deal with, and myself included. My stupid smartphone, right? There's
Throw
nothing.
It out.
Or just turn it off, or or just leave it away, because it's a gateway to not being present, right? And we all get
productive.
Or productive, but you get an email from work at 8:30 at night. There's nothing you can do that's really going to address that problem until the next morning. All you can do is worry about it and not be present to your family. So just put it, have a time every day where you say, I'm done, and put it in a drawer or turn it off, or just turn off updates or whatever works for you to say, no, that this is an intentionally present time with my family. And then the incidental presence happens in that, right? As everybody's talking, and your son will walk in and he'll start talking about something, and about 30 seconds in the conversation, you'll realize, oh wait, this is important, right? So you're not going to get that chance back. It doesn't happen again, right? That window opened. You have to let it happen. And so, but if you're engaged in your phone, you go, oh, just give me a second, I got to reply. Oh, just give me one more second. Guess what? You missed it. You've missed that opportunity. And so that intentional presence.
And it's so easy to have your brain just constantly going with all of these things, with the instant communication via the phone. Not long after Gabe and I got married, I remember, I really made the standard that for the most part, after he got home, I tried to, distance myself from the phone. And then I've always tried to kind of turn it off around 7:30 or so, just so I'm not looking at the screen or have my brain going. And he, sometimes pick up my phone and be like, oh, you've got, all these notifications, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And he'd start naming all of the text messages and missed calls that I have. And Chris, I would be like twitching. I'd be like, oh my gosh, my brain was shutting down. And now I'm thinking, maybe I should check this text. Maybe I should probably call this person back. And the poor guy, I think, got the wrath from me because he kept reminding me of everyone who was trying to communicate with me. And he just didn't get it at first because I'm trying to shut down, and I can't when there's just this instant communication always present around us. And he gets it now, but it was funny because it was a transition where we're not used to thinking this way in 2020 because we think it's normal to be perpetually available and checking.
Oh yeah. I mean, think about just the way our whole etiquette has changed. It used to be you wouldn't call, I know we've talked about this before, but you wouldn't call someone after a certain time, right? It's just completely rude to call a family after 10 or 9 or whatever. You would not call people during the dinner hour because they're eating dinner. You can't call right now. And now we're texting people at midnight and, oh, it's just a text.
Yeah.
How dare you? Like, how dare you intrude on that? Or you're on a date with your spouse, or just having a conversation and someone blinks in. How dare you? I mean, like, so just put that, you're at dinner with someone and just physically manifest that in your mind. It would be so out of place for someone to pop in and start talking to you about work in the middle of your date with your wife, but yet we accept it all the time. Right. Yeah. And that is essentially what's happening. And so, that's a huge thing, just to be present in our homes, and again, that takes some organization during our day. We'll get more done that way, and then turn the rest of it off so we can actually have that rest we need.
This brings up etiquette. I know we're like totally pulling in a different direction here from like the marriage perspective, but it does impact marriage because the distractibility is so intense and so real, but also the thoughtfulness toward others. I've had to get to the point where I go, okay, if I have to text this person, it's up to them if they want to respond or not. If I have to text them at a weird hour, but ultimately I should have some level of culpability for the things I'm trying to communicate at a certain time of day.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the reality is if I'm thinking about something in the middle of the night, then I either didn't get it done during the day or it can wait till tomorrow. Right. And if it can wait till tomorrow, then what I should do is I should write it down on a piece of paper, or I should just make myself a note to follow up tomorrow.
The many notes.
Oh, I know. Oh, tasks lists and all of those things. But yeah, but again, back to that marital relationship, right? It's a poison. Because what happens is, if we're not present, as we're withdrawn, as we're not listening, we stop sharing, right? I can't, and same thing I mentioned, my adolescent son, but it's the same thing with my spouse, and nobody does this intentionally. It's not like, well, I'm just not going to talk to them anymore. But the message that's being sent is so loud and so clear that I'm not important to you. And this is all on a subconscious level, right? But then we just stop going to each other. We stop bringing those, those cares to each other. We stop bringing those vulnerabilities to each other.
Because they're not going to respond.
Right.
And that's the approach.
One last thought on that too is, your kids can be very damaging to your relationship. You have to prioritize your spouse. And there are times when my wife needs to talk to me, but my kids are all blah, blah, blah. And I have to say, no, I need to hear mom right now. Right. That's important. And vice versa. Right. Like there's times we have to say, no, you can wait. Dad was talking. Right. And when you get in that relationship where the kids are the most important thing all the time. Right. Well, guess what? That's going to damage your relationship. We're not going to ignore them, but we have to be present to each other as spouses so that we can give the kids that they need and the support that they need. And if we don't support each other, we're just not going to have the energy or the capacity to do that.
One of the important things that is discussed in psychology is making how we have these moments throughout the day where we try to touch someone in terms of contact, both emotional and verbal. And so, perhaps, I will say like, oh, thanks for giving that to me, but maybe you didn't respond. And maybe that happens over and over again. At a certain point, we don't continue to make those touches of contact if they're not reciprocated. And so this can happen with children, where a kid stops trying to show you maybe their homework or their grades that they're proud of because you're looking at your phone and they're not getting a response, or with your spouse, because like you said, you just kind of allow yourself to be distracted every time an important conversation's coming up. So then the conversation just never happens. And so these touches of contact on a psychological level are so important. Build habits of communication, how we interact with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And the real danger too is when we stop having that presence, we stop having those intentional contacts. Then what happens is we begin to assign motives to the other person because we're not connected. Right. And so something will happen, an accident or something, or the socks get left on the floor or whatever. And now it's like, well, they do that because of this. Right. And it's a devil's playground. Right. That's the story he wants to tell. But that once you start down that road, it's hard to pull out. You can get in a habit, right? Because all of these thoughts form neural pathways. All of these things sort of become programming where we begin to assume the negative about our spouse. And pulling out of that is a difficult thing to do once it's an established habit. And you will hear people talk like this about their spouse. And the strongest thing you can do when you recognize those patterns is to just stop immediately and say, no, that is not at all who I married. That can't possibly be true. So I'm not even going to go down that road in my mind, hell, comma, no. right? Like I'm not even going to engage with that lie. But again, if you're not connected, it's so easy to have that begin to creep in.
That's Chris Mueller from Everyday Catholic. You can find him at everydaycatholic.com. Chris, thanks for joining us. We'll be sure to connect with you on social media if you want to check him out. We've gone ahead and tagged him. I'll be right back. It's not too late to answer that question. How do you know when someone's the right person to marry? You can give us a call or head over to social media at relevantradio.com/trending. The Relevant Radio studio line is sponsored by Catholic Order of Foresters. Information about employment opportunities and their flexible premium life insurance plans are available at relevantradio.com/forester.
Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
How do you know if you should marry someone, and what makes someone marriage material? Welcome back to our weekly marriage hour here every Thursday on Trending. And no, the baby's not here yet. I'm here with you live. Keep praying. We'll keep you updated. The news is yet to come. I had a question come in from Joanna from Fountain Valley, California. Welcome, fellow Californian. I would love to hear from you as you want to share a little bit about your and your husband's story with in vitro fertilization and infertility.
Hi, Timmerie. Nice talking
Welcome
to
to
you.
Trending. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi. I follow you on social media too. So I'm waiting for your baby too, and thank you for all that you do. So I know yesterday you said something on your social media about IVF, and someone asked you if you did IVF, and you said you're against it. So I did IVF. And I told the the call screener that when I was going through the process, I did not know clearly that the church against it. So until I had my son, and I can't even tell you how many times I did IVF, I know that it doesn't apply to just one person; it's applied to everybody. So I went to it's called backyard theology, and the priest was explaining, why the church against IVF. And so I can tell you one thing, that I was sitting in the church, air conditioning was full blown, and then I was sweating because of all the stuff that the priest was saying, and I felt so sinful. So I went to confession more than 3 times. But one thing that I can tell you, even now, going back, I don't even know the answer. Knowing what I know now, I don't know if I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to do IVF, or I still do it. So the answer for me is still, I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. So because, I feel like, I tried for 16 years to have a baby. 16 years. I sell everything I own so I can go to the doctor. And the reason why I say knowing now, I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, because, I feel like, if God did not bless me with the baby, there is no way I can have my son because of all the time, all the 16 years that I tried. So I felt like, as a parent, sometimes, your kids ask you something and you said, no, it's not good for you. But, the kids keep asking. So you said, okay, well, I know it's not good, but I'm going to give it to you because I love you. That's how I felt. So
Joanna.
I'm very happy. I enjoy every second. I thank you, God, every single day for my son.
Absolutely. Joanna, thank you so much for sharing, because you bring up a really good point. First and foremost, any child that is conceived and brought into this world via in vitro fertilization is a gift, and we have to acknowledge and appreciate and respect that new human life. But what's important here and what the church is discussing is that the means to getting there was not correct, but many people like yourself, Joanna, didn't know. are horrified to find out some of the steps in the process. People don't even realize some of the steps that are occurring or the long-term impact on the body, or that abortion can or is a part of the IVF journey. In most cases, even just the wording that the doctors use. And I've heard stories of this where people didn't realize, what was happening when the conversation happened surrounding, which embryos we were going to keep and which ones we were not going to. And, some people might say, how could you not know? But I think the way we sometimes see this technical conversation via IVF, people don't realize. And when you're in that state of going through the process, this is why we have to have those conversations beforehand. And your story is such a testimony, because people are selling their lives and so desperately giving everything in order to conceive a child. And we're seeing that the studies are pointing to the fact that this is incredibly harmful and damaging, not just for the individual woman, but for the couple. We see many low success rates in terms of marriages after the fact. And, we can't get into all of that in the personal story here, but it's important to understand that the person in these situations has to be dealt with as a whole. We can't just isolate the desire to have a child from the need of the couple, the spouses, the long-term health, the fact that abortion is involved, the fact that the freezing of embryos is a part of the IVF journey. And so this is why we have to deal with the whole issue all together, all at once, and not just recommend it as a solution, because it does have a low success rate. As you mentioned, Joanna, you had to go through multiple rounds. You said you can't even say how many rounds of IVF you went through in order to conceive, and you were blessed with a child. That is a gift. And sometimes we may throw our arms up and say, well, God, if you would allow this process to happen for a child to be conceived via IVF, how can this be wrong? But there are a lot of things that can happen in this world that God allows. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily right. Can we treasure the people and loved ones we have in the face of everything we've experienced? Absolutely. With unconditional love and respect. But that doesn't mean we can't say that the means to getting there wasn't the best health option, moral option, religious option, choice for that child. We have to look at a person as a whole. And I think that your story, I really appreciate you sharing here on Trending. We're going to come back taking up that question of how do you know if someone's marriage material, and if you're possibly just settling when you start to think about marriage. We'll be right back.
This is Saint of the Day for Thursday, December 17th on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app. Today's saint was a Benedictine nun who accomplished a great deal in her life. She was a mystic, a writer, and Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI named St. Hildegard of Bingen a doctor of the Church. She became a Benedictine nun at 18. You can thank her confessor for urging her to write down her own thoughts, because her books at over 300 letters help people like you and me see ourselves as human sparks, her term, for God's love. Hildegard certainly had her critics. As she traveled through Central Europe in the early 12th century, she would challenge those who rejected the Catholic Church. At her canonization in 2010, Benedict XVI praised Hildegard for using her God-given gifts with humility. And isn't that a beautiful witness for you and me today?
Learn even more about the saints every day at 10 minutes to 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 a.m. Pacific on Morning Air with John Harper and Glenn Leverance here on Relevant Radio.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
So there was this short video on Twitter that I was watching of Jackie Hill Perry. She's the author of Gay Girl, Good God. She got married after having experienced same-sex attraction. She's married to someone of the opposite sex and is a person of faith. And she shared her journey. I've not read her book yet. I've had many people recommend it, but I've yet to touch on it. But she posted this video that I thought was intriguing, having to do with the idolatry of marriage even within the Christian culture. And I thought this was fascinating, and it relates to the entire question of how do you know if this is the right person to marry, or what makes you marriage material? So I was watching the video, and she basically talked about how there can be this culture in the Christian, I'll add Catholic world, that you just have to find someone and get married. Just find someone, and get married. You know, I've seen people who are on wife hunting sprees, like, I just got to meet one, I've got to get one, throw her over my shoulder and take her with me. Some might find that romantic, but some might say, oh, hold on, that's a little scary. What exactly are you looking for in this relationship? And when I was looking at this, it brings up this whole question. This actually does relate to the IVF issue as well that we were just discussing. Sometimes we can idolize things, such as idolizing babies. That if I could just have that baby, then I will be happy in life. If I could just start dating this person, then I'll feel happy. If I could just get that job, if I could just get married. And we chase our happiness based on that next thing. And sometimes in the Catholic culture, it can be just get married. That's the thing you do. That's the right thing to do, and you'll be happy. Well, that's a sure way to possibly create a marriage that will fail, is to tell people to just get married. I'm not saying that we shouldn't get married. What I am saying is some people have had this attitude, like, just get married, it'll all work out. I do agree in many ways that there is a huge delay in making the commitment to marry in our culture today. However, there can also be this attitude that, oh, we're in love and we're just going to get married. We don't think about any of the pieces that fit together. And so one of the things that Jackie Hill mentioned is, well, we've overemphasized essentially relationships and marriage rather than a relationship with Christ. And I think that this is at the heart of the entire question of how do you know if someone is the one or if you're just settling? So let's talk about this a little bit. That settling question, I think, is prevalent, where we find something easy or convenient. So maybe we move in together, or maybe we say, sure, we'll get married. Because that's what we want. We do want that lifelong committed relationship. But is the ease and the convenience what we're settling into, rather than remembering big picture what we want and what's necessary to get there in order to have a wholesome, healthy marriage? Not easy. I don't even know that I'd necessarily say successful, because marriage is difficult. Then there's the other attitude with this settling question of, am I maybe compromising standards and expectations just to, get this done? Again, coming back to that ease of comfort. Or do I truly love this person and accept the person as they are, knowing that we can grow together? I think there's a difference between going into marriage going, I expect this to change and I expect that to change, versus going, I know that we can grow as people. And I think that's really important, because when you get married, you are getting what you get when you get married. You shouldn't go and going like, okay, once I'm married, I can fix this in him and she's going to change that with her. No, that's not the approach we should have. But also we shouldn't have this, well, I've compromised my standards and I'm just going to go with what's happening here. Then there's this question of, what do they believe about marriage? Because we live in a culture where people have radically different perspectives about what marriage is. And I think the biggest, most important question that needs to come up is, do you believe that marriage is permanent? Till death do us part. You actually might be surprised by the number of people that don't believe that it is. And I think that that's a really good place to start of, what does this person believe marriage is? Do they believe that marriage is meant to be faithful to the spouse only? No extramarital relationships. Looking at images that we shouldn't be looking at. No engaging in even emotional relationships. Being faithful even from the perspective of not putting work and other priorities prior to that commitment, that sacrament of marriage. Do we enter into it freely, or is there something that you kind of feel like you're forced, like you have to get married because that's what, people of faith do? That's actually not necessarily acting in a free way going into a marriage. Are you totally giving yourself, or is there something you're holding back? Perhaps the idea of not having children. And do you believe in the fruitful understanding of marriage, that marriage is oriented toward having children and raising them and growing as a couple and as individuals and fostering a new life and human being in their character and faith? I think these are all very important questions, and it brings us back to this final point, and I'll just touch on it briefly. How do you know if you're marriable? Maybe you really want to get married. You want to start dating. Well, first, is your faith and relationship with God the center of your life? Are you just searching for happiness in other places, or do you have a deep sense of belonging and confidence and self-worth rooted in God? And are you just waiting for someone before you start getting your life together? Or are you already taking responsibility for finances, budgeting, saving, conquering that debt you might have, student loan debt, credit cards? But we can't let the desire for something, whether babies, a spouse, whatever it might be, overrule the importance of growing in our relationship with God and having that confidence and self-worth that we know where we're going, and that comes first and will prepare us to be marriable.